Hi everyone, welcome. We'll just give you a minute to come in and then I'll get kick-started. Right, I'll get started. So I know we've got a lot to squeeze in this short hour. So my name is Holly, I'm the MD of BIMA. Welcome to BIMA's first What's Next session. So we've created these to really get under the skin within a specific sector, looking at the role technology is playing at the moment and the role it could or will play in the future. We thought we'd start off with a particularly tough one, but a very topical one nonetheless, in what's next in public health. Before I pass over to our esteemed host to get things going, I just wanted to give people a bit of a heads up on who BIMA is in case you're not as familiar. So BIMA is UK's biggest digital and tech community. We represent digital talent wherever it is. So across agencies of all different types and sizes, tech companies, brands, service providers, academia, startups, and everything in between. The common thread is that we're all about driving innovation. So whether that's going out to secondary schools across the UK, talking about the opportunities within digital, whether it's sessions like this for learning and development, or thought leadership driven by our 20 different councils and think tanks. It's all about growing your business, giving you a kind of eye into the future, helping you retain, develop, find the right talent, and ultimately drive innovation. So we are a membership association. If you would like to have a chat about membership, how you can get more involved, please do give us a shout. I'm Holly Hall at bima.co.uk. So enough of me. I'd like to introduce you to our host today, Sam Shah. Sam's previous roles have been at the NHSX, consulting government, and he's a digital health tech advisor. He is the FT's fourth most influential BAME tech leader, but I would say much more importantly, he's gone one up this year, and he was in the BIMA 100 class of 2020. So over to you, Sam.
Well, morning everyone, and it's great to be here today with you all, and we've got a fantastic lineup and a great discussion. It's so good that BIMA is hosting this discussion on public health, technology, and some of the issues that we don't always necessarily talk about outside of healthcare. And hopefully today we'll have a bit of a dialogue around where we are with public health, what the role of technology is, how social media is playing a role in disseminating some of that, and what it's really meant for issues such as access to telehealth, tracking and tracing, but more importantly, some of those ethical debates that we might all need to have both now and in the future. I have got a fantastic, amazing panel this morning who have joined me, and I'm going to introduce them. They're going to give you a little bit about themselves in a moment. But we've got Pete Traynor, who is CEO of Valor Health. We've got Helen Balcom, who is the Managing Director of Hive. And we've got Ivana Bartoletti, who is a privacy expert, author and commentator, and recently released a book. Please read it. But I'm going to hand over now. So Ivana, would you like to just introduce yourself a little bit, please?
Thank you. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and great to see you all and you, Sam, because I think the last time we met was a while back, and it's really good. And when you think about meeting a while back, you always think about these sort of conferences with a lot of people joining, and then we've all been we all sort of live on Zoom, and but it's good because it gives us the opportunity to have quite in-depth conversation. I really welcome this one in particular. So my name is Ivana Bartoletti. I in my day job, I work for Deloitte, where I'm technical director, and I look at all issues around privacy and ethics in design and by design, and relation to new technologies, so AI and blockchain tech and big data analytics and all that. It's really fascinating, especially at this time. as we automate and digitize very quickly. And I'm also the co-founder of an organization called Women Leading in AI. And if you're a woman, please join. If you're not, please join anyway, because we're open to everyone. And it's really, and the network aims to encourage people from every background to shape the debate about the future of AI. And the policy around it. So it's not just for techies, but everybody. And I've just published a book. It's called Artificial Revolution, and it's on tech and how technology intersects power, feminism, and privacy. That's me.
Thank you, Rana. And Pete, please can you introduce yourself?
Sorry, I was just writing down the title of your book. I can go and buy it. Hi, everybody. That's a sale, done. My name is Pete Trainer. I'm the CEO of Valor Health. I took over Valor in November last year. We're a telemedicine platform. We provide integrated healthcare over the internet and glass screens. My background is in AI and digital transformation. So when I took over Valor last year, it was really to kind of come in as the new CEO and look at the technology and move us forward and get investment to move forward the kind of algorithms and the artificial intelligence of driving some of the decision making. And now I find myself CEOing a health tech company, a healthcare company in a pandemic, which has been kind of fun. It's been a good boot camp the last 13 weeks or so. So hopefully I can give you a few of the things that we've learned as an organization since the coronavirus lockdown started.
Thank you, Pete. And Helen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for the opportunity. Unfortunately, I don't have any books to my accolades, but it sounds amazing, Ivana. I will definitely get on the purchasing list. I'm managing director of a company called Hive. We're a healthcare communications agency. So we spend our time thinking about how we communicate and develop technology and tools and other types of creative communication in the healthcare space. Whether that's working with healthcare professionals or patients themselves, or indeed the broader public when it comes to sort of broader disease awareness and things. So we broadly touch the surface of all of the topics today. I can't claim to be expert in any particular one of them, but we certainly kind of have to consider every part of that in all of the interactions and things that we do within industry.
Thanks, Helen. So everyone out there is probably familiar with the fact that clearly COVID-19 has happened and it's changed the way in which everyone interacts with health services. And I've certainly seen a massive rise in the use of online channels, whether that is sort of using chatbots, telehealth, and all of these other sorts of ways of people accessing services. And of course, Pete, I know you've got, obviously got a lot of experience in this area. Have you found recently that, has data really played a big part in driving this change? And how are you using data to sort of create the next iteration of telehealth interactions for society? And what are you finding?
Okay, that's a big question to start with. Okay, so I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to just make a point as well. I think there's two things here. We don't go back from this, and I don't think healthcare goes backwards from what just happened. And therefore, the role of data in making sure that when we go forward, we do it correctly is really, really important. And I think what just happened was healthcare has just had its 2008 banking crisis moment. Absolutely, and hence me being so sure that we do not go back from this. We saw in March kind of our audience growing significantly over the period of kind of end of March to the beginning of April, like our entire business revenues and traffic times by 5. We had to look at the data very, very quickly that we were collecting to make sure that we were able to service those people that were coming at us with some very complicated requests kind of ethically and correctly, but also, what their attitudes were, what their fears and what their anxieties were, whether or not we were going to be able to alleviate some of those worries. There was also, I think, at the start of this lockdown, in the same way that people went like grabbing toilet rolls from supermarkets, like there was a perception that telehealth was going to be the answer to everything, and that panic healthcare, became a thing. The data is really not, the data that we've been looking at is really going to have to govern the way that we do stuff, and govern the way that we manage people's expectations. And so I think making sure that our algorithms are tuned correctly and that we're not relying on them. And I think that's really, really important. We're not relying on the algos, we're using them to direct us is an imperative now for the entire industry, actually.
And I'm guessing that technique that's been used to identify the right people, use algorithms to drive people towards a product, have been used in marketing for absolutely years. And Helen, I mean, you must have a view on how this sort of data is used and how we use it in a way to get to the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the interesting thing we've seen since the COVID kind of craziness took hold is just an expediting of trends that were already in play. So there are some big level macro trends in healthcare around the way we communicate, the way we're leveraging data. And I think the consumer brands kind of got there years ago, you know, the customer-led communication, using data and things like omnichannel and kind of more sophisticated approaches. And in healthcare, we've sort of talked about that for a while and we've skirted around the surface. And this has really been the kind of trigger point that's kicked us into action. It's sort of the disruption, I think, the industry and kind of broader public health has needed. So thinking about how we capture data to more sophisticated kind of communication techniques is really important from our perspective. And we've seen huge sways in kind of clients coming to us wanting advice and kind of absolute expertise in how we deliver some of those engagements in just totally different ways. So yeah, fascinating.
I find this area really interesting because if I look at the data that's out there, I tend to find that as age increases, utilization of digital tools and products decreases. And that might, some people might say, well, actually, that's just, you know, I'm looking at sort of one view of the data, but actually, from what I'm seeing from my own patients and others, is that there certainly still is a trend out there. Is there a risk that the data we're using to design products, design schemes, could in itself be biased because it's designed around a group of people that are different to the people that might have the greatest health need? You know, and Ivana and I have spoken about this before, and I'd be really keen, Ivana, to take your view on, you know, what you think about the underlying data around the people that might use these products.
Thank you. So, well, it's a good question. I mean, there is an inherent problem with data and with bias, which is part of the, which is so problematic in itself, obviously, for different reasons. The first one is because the data that we're using is historic data. And one of the problems that we're having with, for example, AI products that we're developing to analyze COVID-19 is the fact that some of these products, they work quite well in the testing phase, but then when you put them out in the world, they don't work as well. And that is because we don't have enough data. In relation to bias, yes, I mean, that is problematic. The key thing is, in my view, to be aware of all this. And there are two solutions, I always say, to how to deal with the problem of bias. One is purely technological. And by mean technological, I mean the solution is to really look at technical solutions, including algorithms that can make you understand which feature the highest and the most important weight in the decision making. There are different solutions to achieve fairness, but there is also a human solution. The human solution is to recognize that there might be a problem of bias that needs to be addressed. And also, as Pete was saying, in my view, is to understand that we're talking about augmenting human capabilities, not replacing them. And that leads me to one thing that I just really want to address and to add to what I think the COVID has really shown to us, which is how interdependent and how interconnected we are as humans. That my personal data, if I've got a disease or not, is very much related to yours, Sam, if we talk for 10 minutes. Interconnection between people, I think, is a watershed moment, and we can harness health data for a public and good. And I think this is perhaps one of the most important things that is emerging from this pandemic, is the value of privacy as an enormous collective value, not just an individual one.
And I think that is really important around that whole dimension of privacy, of trust, of confidence. All of these things play such an important part of how people interact and view services. And Helen, you must have had to do a lot of work with companies out there on how they build that kind of trust with different people, whether it's online, offline, and how they really build that brand. What advice do you have for particularly healthcare brands when you're thinking about this, especially those online ones?
Yeah, gosh, do you know what? I think trust is such a big and important question in all of this. It's about trust to each other. It's about trust to industry. It's about, it spans multiple realms. I think the first place that we always start is authenticity. And I think trust is only built if you really have systems in place and have mechanisms that truly respect individuals and their communities where they are. So they have to make them feel safe. They have to empathize. They have to make them feel understood before you can even begin to think about trust. And I think once you've got that level and you've really started by understanding the experience of individuals, what is it like to be an individual suffering from a disease, taking a medicine, being isolated, being vulnerable, whatever it may be. Once you've got there, you can start to layer on some other things. And I think, Juliet Bauer, who used to head up NHS England and Digital, used to say very often, the benchmark is now, so therefore it has to be at least as good, if not better. Like you can't just be the same in a digital form. You have to go a step above for people to trust and engage with you. And I think that's really, really true. So we have to challenge ourselves to think in a slightly different way. And then I think even beyond that, the role of experts is really key. We all, no matter how scientifically or medically or whatever trained we are, we all do defer to the expertise of healthcare professionals in certain situations. And so trusting in experts and in authority in some cases and so on is something to be increasingly mindful of in a healthcare space that I don't think you have to think about in quite the same way in other sectors.
I think I'm really glad you mentioned the work of Juliet, and during the time we worked together, we did a lot around trying to really promote the role of consumer in all of this across the health system. But one of the challenges has been around lots of new entrants into the telehealth technology space. And the difficulty some of them have had is maintaining standards and compliance that maintains that trust. And Pete, I'd be really interested in your take on what do you do as an organization, as a health tech provider delivering to consumer, to really generate a sense of confidence and trust by maintaining standards? And what are some of the things you look out for?
Yeah, that's a good one. And actually, just to kind of tack that onto the end of a comment that Helen made, one of the things that telemedicine has the opportunity to do and has been doing, and we've certainly tried our very best to do, is fix some of the problems that exist in analog healthcare. And I'll give you a good example, and it links back to the kind of raising trust and standards thing. Is, some of our most positive feedback comes from the fact that we offer our members that come and speak to our GPs a 30-minute appointment slot. You speak to my parents 30 years ago, they'd expect 30 minutes with their GP. Now you go down to the surgery down the road, you get 10 minutes, you're in and out. There's no relationship being built with doctors, unfortunately, because of the pressures of austerity and so on and so forth. Telemedicine gives you that extra 20 minutes because you don't have to go down, check in, sit in the waiting room. We can afford to give people that extra level of commitment and care. And what we see is our NPS is incredibly high. So again, we're applying digital transformation metrics that banks and stuff have traditionally used to healthcare, which is remarkable. And our kind of net promoter is remarkable because people are being cared for. I think what's really important, and we certainly we're regulated by the Care Quality Commission. We have licensed doctors. They've all been through exactly the same standard and training as a traditional GP or pharmacist or physiotherapist or counsellor, etc. So just move them onto a different channel. That's pretty much it. So the governance is exactly the same to a certain extent, if not more governed than your traditional healthcare that you would get down bricks and mortar.
Do you think there's something that online providers need to do that is more than what an offline provider would have to do? And the example I'd use is, we've seen digital providers where data sometimes is shared between different entities, or occasionally that data might get exposed in some way. Do you think there needs to be a different standard that those online providers need to meet because the internet is so new in its way in which people interact relative to physical services. And we've got services out there that, where in a traditional setting, someone will come to see me, the data's sort of there, I either write it down and put it into an entity. This is kind of using the power of the internet, lots of other things connected and connected devices. Is there a risk that in that environment, that ecosystem, data could end up being exposed, and so we need a different set of rules?
I mean, there's always a risk that data gets exposed, but that's the same in any industry, and I don't belittle the healthcare challenge. In fact, ethically, in some ways, it's probably more complex. We're seeing a lot of data breaches at the moment, Babylon. Last week, so of course those issues are new, and these will be embryonic in this stage. But I think I think to expose, just to be a challenger, to expose data between healthcare providers in a team or in different companies or whatever is almost an imperative now. And I think what we can do in digital healthcare is make sure that we create truly integrated healthcare experiences for the patients, which actually in some clinics don't happen. So if I go to an NHS clinic, and I'm not knocking the NHS, I really am not, because they're a brilliant organisation, a kind of national treasure. But sometimes you speak to a doctor in one room, and it's 2 days before the doctor in the room next door has been consulted for the next appointment. At least in a digital setting, you can pass that data to a single system, and it's all done virtually.
And I think that's really important that there's an expectation that the public have, but we also have a duty to try and do that in a safe way, maintain privacy, but at the same time get the best outcome. And I know, Ivana, you'll have a view on this, but when it comes to sharing between organizations, what do you think some of the issues are that relate to privacy that we need to be mindful of when we are thinking about that sharing between different healthcare providers, and how we balance the demand from the population with the needs to protect privacy?
Yes, that's the key question, isn't it? So first of all, I just wanted to say, the first thing I want to say is about trust. People, patients, they're never going to trust anything if there is no clear understanding of what the data is going to be shared with and for. So trust is absolutely paramount. And the fear that we've seen over the last few months in the aftermath of COVID around, for example, the tracing app, that people were saying there's been a lot of debate around it and a lot of fear that there was techno-solutionism rather than a real need. These fears are legitimate. And to be honest, these fears are important, and they also need to be valued, because we've seen in the past, that things can go horribly wrong if they're not governed properly. So that's the first point. The second point, we need to move in health to accountability 2.0, I think. And by saying so, I think we need responsible data sharing principles and responsible data sharing practices to be established by every organization. And this is important. Leveraging privacy enhancing technologies is key. And I would like these privacy enhancing technologies like differential privacy and homomorphic encryption to be more available and cheaper for organizations to use. And at the moment, they're still quite niche for us to use. And the other thing which is important in relation to the data sharing is that, yes, it's true, we need high quality, accessible, well-archived data, which is really crucial to data sharing. But we also need to be privacy preserving. And if we don't get this into our top of our agenda, I don't think we're going to build that system of trust that we need for organizations, it's the NHS, but also organizations like P1 to thrive.
Sam's frozen.
Sam.
Did you lose me?
Yeah, just for a second, Sam, but you.
Okay.
You may have lost me, actually.
I've lost you, yes.
Right. So, here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Sam.
I think I'm back. So, Helen, on that topic of trust.
Sorry, Sam, I'm losing you.
We've losing That's not good.
And sharing.
Sam, we've got an issue. I think you're being very in and out there.
Welcome to digital transformation, everyone.
I mean, I think I got some of those pieces. I think it was kind of in the issue of trust and sharing of data.
Yeah.
Is that where you were going, Sam? I mean, I can pick up there in terms of, you know, there's this piece about trust in sharing of data, isn't there? In terms of, you know, there is huge benefit to this data. And I think importantly in health, you know, privacy and ethics are hugely important and hugely debatable. But I think we have to remember the kind of role in informing science and informing clinical kind of practice, and indeed, especially in something like COVID, what that data can enable if collected in a kind of correct way. So I think there is a huge debate in my mind about how we share data or encourage the sharing of data for public benefit, whilst entirely respecting the need for individual choice and freedom and boundaries and so on. And in my mind, that kind of comes back to the quality of information provision out there and how credible and, you know, what sources we're kind of enabling for people to be able to make fair and balanced choices. But in Sam, I kind of heard words, but I think we're kind of into that sort of point about ethics of sharing data potentially.
Completely, and I'm glad you picked up on it. And from a marketing point of view, we've got loads of things out there that you marketed. So many products and services that you marketed to the population. Social media plays a big role in this. How do we improve what the public see, believe, how they... There's so much out there, and what should people believe or not? And especially if you look at tracking and tracing and the information out there, I can imagine for a lot of people it's very confusing as to what they do. What would your advice be on how we make this better?
Yeah, sure, my goodness. I mean, I think it's an inherent challenge and it's not one that's going away, right? Like, you know, social media specifically as a channel is here to stay, and it has a major impact for positive good as well. But there's inherent bias in social media. It is an opinion. It is about people volunteering opinions of their own, and indeed kind of being targeted with opinions that are relevant to them. So I think it's about acknowledging it. I think Ivana spoke to this really eloquently as well. It's about acknowledging what are and aren't the kind of confines of these channels, being really open in, you know, what we are comfortable with and what we're confident in, making sure we regulate where we can in terms of the information that's coming outwardly from industry and kind of broader organizations. You know, when we sit in pharma and some of our clients in the private sector, we've got things like the ABPI and MHRA kind of all over that sort of stuff. Like, what can we do in other spaces that help us to kind of have those rules of practice and give us real guidance? But I don't think we're ever going to, nor should we, solve the problem of social and kind of other channels being platforms for opinion and potentially therefore kind of non-accurate information. I think it's just about making sure that that accurate information is out there and is accessible and is kind of available for people to then inform those choices.
Can I just add something onto that? Especially since I took over this role, and my relationship to social media has had to change dramatically, because, you know, it's where we get opinions from. And I think what I've spotted is in the last few months, especially, like, there appears on social media to be absolutely no place for nuance. Like, it's absolute adoration or extreme hatred towards every possible issue. And so we have to look at social media channels and any data that's being used from those particular conversations probably quite sparingly, as controversial as that is, because it probably doesn't reflect the reality of what's going on the ground in terms of how services are being run and the complexities that drive some of these services. And most people that shovel comments towards, you know, businesses like Valor or have an opinion because we're private and we're not in the NHS, don't even realise that we're as regulated as a traditional healthcare company, and that we have a license and our doctors go to the same colleges and stuff like that. So, I don't know. Social media, I think, is a tricky beast.
I'm glad you raised the question there about sort of regulation, because
Losing you again.
So many stories have.
Sorry, Sam, we can't. We've lost you completely, I think.
Can I pick up on the regulation element?
That would be great. Thank you, Vanna.
So it's an interesting one, the one about regulation, and I would throw back a challenge at Pete, because if regulated, I mean,
regulated, especially at the moment with so many popping up. I think it's an internet conspiracy.
Okay, so I'm gone. So it's interesting because you say, Sam, you say, Peter, you were saying we are regulated. Yes, I mean, yeah, you're the practitioners. There is due diligence, there is regulation. I mean, however, I think that if you think about the situation, what happened with COVID, with the app, for example, think about the tracing app, and the debate that we've had over this tracing app for the last few months. With digital tracing has been talked for a long time, and for example, personally, I've always felt quite conflicted about it. Conflicted because on the one end, I was very much onto, I want a centralized app because I want the data to be used as much as possible, and the centralized app would help that. But on the other hand, I don't want a centralized app because I totally fear that COVID data today may become surveillance data tomorrow. And the reason why I fear that is because it's happened in the past. So that is one big thing. So I felt, very uncomfortable about it. So the fear that people have about data is a reasonable one. But we've missed and we've lost a great opportunity, I think. And the great opportunity that we've lost is we haven't enshrined protections around what can and cannot be done with the data through Parliament. The reason why I'm saying this is because if we had the courage to enshrine this through an expedite rule, people will have had the oversight, the clarity, the knowledge about the governance, the knowledge about sunset clauses. They're absolutely necessary for people to trust the way that we handle data, especially in health. And to me, there was a really big missed opportunity, because without oversight, without clarity, without the possibility, without knowledge of what's going to happen to my data, and how can I ask for redress, and how can I intervene if I'm unhappy, I don't think we're going to get the level of trust that people need. And this is really, really important, because if we want to actually share more data, use more data, and really harness the value of data, we've got to do it in a way that cannot be based on individual consent only anymore. We've got to find new ways that probably sort of legislative processing governing framework is a good way of doing that. Perhaps thinking about intermediaries, data trusts, data cooperatives could be an even better way. But we've got to think about how we individuals relate to personal data in a different way. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to really harness the value of data. And I think in that context, we have lost and we've missed a great opportunity to show that there is no conflict, there is no trade-off between health and privacy. And the reason why there is no trade-off is because there is no dilemma, because we have clear oversight, we have clear governance, we have clear accountability, and we have clear data retention clauses enshrined in law. And the fact that we haven't done it, I think, is, from a health perspective, is quite problematic.
And Ivana, do you think that, if we look at what happened with the Health Select Committee and the whole discussion that took place around tracking and tracing and testing, and there was a whole dialogue there and a response there, it felt like that response was robust, but at the same time, it didn't actually provide the confidence to people out there as to what the government was really going to do. And it may be everything was well-intentioned and everything is being considered carefully and properly, but it feels like there's something being lost there where people haven't been given the information they need to make an informed decision. I know you were going to come in there with a point. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's not that much I can add because I agree with absolutely everything that Vanna just said, like vehemently. One of the things that's really interesting about being Pete Traynor is I'm married to a human rights lawyer and have been for a long time. So, you know, as a data and AI person, you know, I'm always having conversations at home in terms of the human angle of it. I think one of the things that if we have to remember from digital full stop, not just healthcare, it's the kind of data that we're talking about, we've only really been collecting it for 15 years. Like it's a very short space of time in terms of the pace that this has gone. And so there's a huge piece around educating the public on what data is. My mum still thinks it's the thing she buys from Vodafone every month. You know, she doesn't understand that she's leaving a vapor trail behind her every time she bops around on a piece of glass. Like she doesn't get it. She's in her 70s, and so I think there is still some naivety about this. And also, until that education piece is done, how can we ask the public whether they want to trust the government with it or a private company with it? They don't even know what it is.
I mean, Helen, you'll be familiar with not just from healthcare, but from other sectors. You know, how do we change this relationship between government and the public? And if there had to be a campaign that's put together, what would we put in it?
Blimey. I think, to Pete's point, I think there's a huge educational element to it. I think there's a piece about making sure that we really genuinely all start from a base level of understanding that means that therefore we can appreciate what we're really asking of people, because I think there's some natural assumptions that come into play. And in reality, you know, Sam, you asked the question earlier about different demographics and different kind of access and things like that. And I think that applies to education, data, and that world as well. So I think there's a part there that's about awareness, that's just making sure we're all starting on the same page. I think there's then some really compelling stuff that's about really understanding why, understanding what benefit this data is being collected for and what the kind of purpose of it is. And with authenticity, as I sort of said earlier, you know, I think when COVID started, there was that wonderful sort of app from King's College that came through and various other kind of things that made their way around. And there was a huge kind of solidarity and contribution from public to really want to be doing something to contribute. And I think there's loads of appetite for things like this, but it's about being open and transparent about the purpose, about the reasons behind it, and about what we're then going to do with that data and information. I think, Ivana, I was in the same camp as you in terms of, you know, surveillance tool of the future. And I think it's just about being really open and then doing what we say we're going to do. Like, you know, and I think governments across the globe, I won't hone in on any one of them, but have historically always fallen down on delivering on promise, right? Like, I think there's an element there of we have to say what we're going to do and then do it. And that's true in all walks of life. So for me, a campaign is both awareness, purpose, and then kind of real transparency. And what does and doesn't go well, you know, I think there are brands out there who have real traction because they're delivering purpose, they're really clear on their values, and they're really clear on what they're about. And they're also really honest when they mess it up. They're totally out there and the first to admit and put their hands up when something goes wrong. And I think finding that balance is probably where I'd try and start.
And, you know, if I may add to this, if it's okay, Sam, but I think that the other problem that I face sometimes when working with organizations on this, that it's very difficult at the moment because sometimes we don't really know.
I think
we don't really know if something is going to work or not. Do you see what I mean? I mean, we are still, especially on COVID related, we don't really know if things are going to work or not. And at the moment, what we're seeing is a proliferation of new AI-based and tech-based tools that are aimed, for example, to the return to work and the collection of temperature and even associated with facial recognition. And so there is the feeling, I think, in population around techno-chauvinism and techno-solutionism. You know, there is this feeling that we are rushing to a technological solution because we must do something about things. And I think we've got to be careful that we safeguard the value of what we are doing by really understanding that there is a risk of techno-solutionism and things can get all messed up because some things that have really high value then get confused with this sort of glamorous techie products that are coming to facilitate our return to work and all that. And I think the main issue that, you know, has emerged with the COVID-19 app for me in relation to being that public health in that case, but not just in that case, should be decided by epidemiologists and not by cryptographers. You know, so what is the role here of experts? What is the role here of public health practitioners? And what is the role of epidemiologists? And in that case, it seemed more the debate was run by cryptographers rather than, and I think it's really important that we talk about these things and say, how do we understand if we can, if we have the, if we can interfere in people's privacy, if we don't know the complete value thing.
Oh, it's really not on our side today, is it? We've got Ivana as well.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now.
Oh, good. Now, what I was saying basically is that what I worry about is that we lose people by presenting sort of solutions that taste and of techno-chauvinism, techno-solutionism, and a little of must do something, rather than really complex, thought through solutions. And I think is really important because we need to build that trust. And with the COVID-19 app, what I felt is that, you know, public health needs to be decided by epidemiologists and not by cryptographers. And I think, you know, that was a debate that, you know, has been important and great. But if we want to really build and harness people's trust so they can think about their data, not just as a personal thing, but as a collective value, as a great public asset, then we have to be able to say, okay, what is the due diligence? What is the process we're going to follow so that we just don't embrace a product because it's a solution which is glamorous, but actually does not respond to the need that we've got.
Just add to that.
I think that's
just really quickly. Some people in the questions have even, you know, they're asking questions about the countries that did this quickly, and I'm like, when you look at the names that come up, they're probably not governments that have got a good track record, or they're nations that already have effectively surveillance state in place, and that helps them respond to these public health black swan events quickly. Doesn't mean they're right, and also we should probably celebrate the fact that this is a country where we do have still quite a lot of liberal ideals and ideas, and we should hang on to those and not lose those. And there are a lot of people that are frustrated that we didn't react quicker, we didn't get an app out quicker, did it right, you know, we used the Isle of Wight and actually it didn't work, and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, at least we're doing at least we're responding to this in a slightly more measured way than just get it out and then worry in 18 months time that we have instigated like the biggest sort of data privacy breach this country has ever seen, on top of the pandemic, which is completely sort of unprecedented. So I think we have to be really careful about knee-jerking in response to this kind of black swan event with a piece of technology.
Is there a risk that decision makers, policy makers who are running programs, it becomes a knee-jerk reaction, and it becomes a necessity through which things are done? We create programs. I'd welcome your view on whether technology implementation in healthcare is really considered in the way that it should be, or does it end up becoming a reaction to what's in vogue at the time?
Bit of a broad stroke. I think there's two camps in everything here. So there's, you know, private medical response with, you know, in the same way that we're like fintech companies responded to the issues in, you know, financial services. They went off and they started fixing those problems kind of independently and then brought them back to the middle. I think we're slow to respond in a government-led initiatives sometimes, even though they're brilliant. And I think private health tech companies probably have a role to play in moving the standard and the quality of health tech forward. I don't think the two can exist without each other, but I think it's quite a broad. It's a generalisation to assume that, you know, technology is the answer, but I definitely think really private medical companies can make those and probably make the mistakes. And I probably shouldn't say that as a CEO of a health tech company, but we'll probably, we're all making small mistakes and learning from this situation as well. So,
Helen, there's a question from Nathaniel around going back to trust and about education. Do you think there's something we need to do perhaps earlier on around it comes to trust in technology?
Yeah, I totally agree. I just saw that comment in the Q&A, Nathaniel. I think absolutely it's about back to basics education and trust in the tech. But I equally think there was a question from Peter about the history of data use by governments and trust there. And I think, if I was speaking to a client on this, if they were all clients of mine, I'd be talking about really kind of critically understanding insights of our audiences. What is the experience? Why are there pain points? What's going on? And then thinking about a different way we can deliver that information, because it's all well and good saying that the basic principle is education or whatever we may decide it is, but it's about how we land that information and who is the voice of that information. I think one of the things you've got my advertising hat on at the moment, but I think one of the things that's been really apparent is that the NHS has kind of emerged as the biggest national brand ever. It's kind of come out as this amazing entity. And actually, is there something that therefore of the kind of coattails of that we can leverage in terms of how information and education is disseminated and how we actually kind of get some of that real motivation and kind of camaraderie around an incredible brand and actually make sure that this isn't just a short-lived window. So education for sure, potentially a different voice and a different way of delivering that moving forwards would be my view.
So,
one more point.
Please speak.
And it's going to be really quick. Patient voice has not been discussed so far, and patient voice, I think, is probably the most important element in this, because ultimately we are talking about health and people's well-being and things like that. So they must have the choice, and they must be part of that conversation, and we must not be making decisions on their behalf, like full stop. In the same way that every other industry goes kind of user-centered or customer-focused or whatever, we're talking about patients, and therefore every business, whether it's government or private, has to have the utmost respect for the audience that's ultimately consuming this product. And that for me is where insight is led, right? It's about the individuals experiencing disease, taking medicine, accessing health, and that's the insight that has to ground everything. It's the kind of only common denominator in a way. Right, is the thing that can guide loads of that discussion.
I mean, Darren's asked a great question there, which is around the NHS, and of course, it only seems to change from necessity. And how do we guard against this current change right now being a reaction to something which is more considered long-term, that transformation? And it goes back to this issue for me around how do we change the perspective so we're thinking about systems, user centricity, and design in a different way that's not a reaction to the now but the longer term? And what do we do to improve participation with the public? And Ivana, I'd be really interested in your role, but both in what you're doing now, but also more broadly. How do we change the relationship so this is not a reaction, but we involve the public in the design of future health services?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good question. I mean, I've been advocating for a sort of multi-stakeholder open approach to the design of technology, because otherwise we're not going to be able to serve exactly the people that we want to help. And I think this is really important. So in fact, for example, when it comes to deploying AI in health, and with all the implications that they can have, and the risks and the challenges, but also the opportunities, obviously, then we need to embrace what is the sort of more negotiation approach in terms of how can we involve the end users in what we're going to do? How can we negotiate the intrusion in privacy, for example? How can we say, okay, this is what we would like to do. This is the purpose and what we would like to achieve. This is going to impact you. And are you okay with this? And what do you think? And embrace the sort of the values that come out of negotiation, and not just of a few people in the Silicon Valley, I always say. It's really ultimately we do want an open approach. And the same when it comes to data sharing. I mean, ultimately, if you think about data sharing, is really data sharing has got impact on specific individuals and communities, and it needs to deal with practical and socio-technical barriers if we want to really it to play a part in equitable research. So I think it's really important to say, how do we make sure that when we talk ethics, and when we talk privacy, when we talk ethics and privacy by design in AI, which has become a massive buzzword, we say that that also means that we put consumers, users, citizens, as well as workers and employees, NHS staff, for example, and health-related staff at the center of what we're doing. And this might be a very complex and a little bit longer in terms of process. But I mean, when I work with organizations and I say, look, we've got to have a multi-stakeholder approach to this. We have to bring the entire organization and the community we're going to operate in to get alongside and to bring it with us. That is incredible in the longer term. It's really, really important in the longer term, because it means that you are based in what you're doing on trust. And this becomes particularly important when we navigate some really complex issues, for example, around explainability. What does explainability mean? So, for example, explainability for a practitioner is very different from explainability for a patient. But how do we navigate what that explainability means so that doesn't fail exactly those people that we want to protect and safeguard the most? That cannot be done in isolation. That needs to be done in a participatory approach. So the way that we build that participatory approach, for example, to consequence scanning of what we're doing, I think is absolutely key for these technologies to be able to thrive in the future.
And on that note, if we're thinking about making participation better generally, right now, a lot of ways in which that happens is through the channel of social media. But of course, that might not necessarily be representative of all the people we're trying to get to. And Helen, you've probably got some view on this, but how do we do that? How do we make sure that if we're using different channels to include people in decisions, that we get everyone involved? Is there a way we can guard against it being skewed?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it comes back to insight for me. It comes back to really, do we understand the people that we're trying to engage with? And have we actually spent some time really considering what it's like to be those individuals, or communities? There are multiple ways to solve a problem would be my sort of overarching thought to that. And actually, it's great that we've got all of this accessibility in terms of channels. And I really do think that digital and technology has an opportunity to democratize health and to really kind of answer some real kind of challenging questions in the health arena. But it's not exclusive to that. And I think we have to just remember the value of, simple things, whether that's a face-to-face interaction with your doctor, or whether that's a conversation with a friend and a colleague that's kind of worthwhile. And I just think we have to deeply analyze where are people most comfortable, not necessarily where are they going right now, not necessarily what devices do they have in their homes, but where will they feel safe? Where will they trust information? And then how can we build capability if we need to? But that starting point in my mind, and Ivana talks to it really in a lovely way there. I think let's step into some people's shoes and really understand what we're dealing with and what we need to change and what we don't need to change, because some of it's there already, I think.
So I guess finally, and final sort of comments from everyone really, and it would be useful to think about the future. So we're coming out of the COVID situation. We're all in a better place, I hope. What do you see as being the future of healthcare technology in the way in which we can better meet the needs of people? And I guess what I really like to know is, what do you think the best way is of connecting to people to help meet their needs? And Pete, I'd like to start off with you.
Connecting to people. Well, I mean, just to go right back to the very first thing I said, we don't go back from the last 13 weeks, 13 months. So we're not going backwards from this. We're not going to go back to medicine in the same way that it's been done. Technology is now kind of an integral part of the way that healthcare is provided. So I think, to all points in the last 10 minutes or so, we just have to treat everybody as a human and not a user or a consumer or a patient. Like, they're human beings, they're fallible, they're scared, they're vulnerable. Anything to do with healthcare is intrinsically linked to vulnerability. And so we just have to be very respectful when we move forward. And I think what people want in the same way that they want to be included in the data conversation and the tracing conversation and things like that. They just want to be included in the decisions that are being made about their health and well-being, and that includes how their health and well-being is being serviced. So we just have to make sure that everything we do, Vala is very much patient-led, patient first. That's all we can do. That is the kind of the major governing rule. We're licensed. We've got, you know, all the bits of paper that allow us to do what we do, but ultimately we fail if we don't include the patient in every single decision we make, and that includes which platform, which technology, what data is used to make those decisions.
I think that concept of human is so important, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me. And Helen, from your perspective, if you had to give advice to public agencies and others in terms of how they market and deal with issues related to health tech or tracing, what would your main message to them be?
Yeah, I think it's coming back to authenticity and honesty for me. I think it's about recognizing that innovation, which, you know, technology affords us, and I'm sorry to use the word because innovation is a bit of an annoying word at times, but I think we don't want to stifle progress, I guess is where I'm getting at. But in order to make sure we really take the advantage of the kind of technologies and opportunities in front of us, we have to be authentic, and we have to be open and honest about what we know, what we don't know, where we're experimenting, where we're totally confident. And people will come with us in that situation. You know, they will respect that and either choose to be with us or not to be with us, but at least they're making informed choice. I think my overarching thought kind of for the future, to leverage on what Pete was saying, is just that I think moving forward, every experience will to some degree be a health experience. So we as an agency focus on health experiences, and usually those have been in people who are in sickness and kind of needing treatment and support. And actually in reality, every experience and interaction that any human being has for certainly the foreseeable future is going to have an element of greater rigor around their health and their well-being in whatever capacity. So it's going to touch everybody continuously for the kind of foreseeable, would be my overriding thought.
Ivana, you've obviously been very involved in topics around health and privacy and technology for a long time, and I know you've got a lot of insights on this. One area that I'd be great to get your sort of closing thoughts on are, we've had care.data a long time ago in the NHS. We've now moved forwards, and sometimes some people would say not much has changed with tracking and tracing. If you had to give any message to those out there that are either developing technology or in government implementing it, what would it be in relation to how to get trust and privacy in a better place with the public?
Yeah, so I'm going to say three very brief things on this. First one is, I'm glad that one of the positive elements of this pandemic, it'll be the focus on how data can be leveraged and how we can really improve the use, especially of artificial intelligence in health, because we've had some limitations in the past. Also because I have to say, because I like being polemical all the time, but a lot of the focus on AI and technology has been around surveillance and punishment. So I'm really hoping that one of the things, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, that we're going to see is more investment in AI research and how AI and our healthcare can benefit from artificial intelligence and new tech. Second thing that I wanted to say on this is there is no trade-off to be sought between privacy and health, and whoever wants to bring to the discussion this trade-off, and whoever wants to say that we have to choose between the two, they're only doing it because they want unbounded surveillance. Let me be honest, there's no trade-off, because there is absolutely no dilemma there if we are able to establish clear governance, clear structures, clear accountability. And the last thing I wanted to say, this is why if we really want to harness the value of data, we've got to do three things. Accountability 2.0. The second thing that we have to do is responsible data sharing and understanding what that absolutely means. And the third one is new infrastructures, whether it's data cooperatives, whether it's data trust, but we need new infrastructures and new intermediaries between us as patients and the organizations using our data for the public good.
Thank you so much, Ivana. Well, I'm really grateful to BIMA for hosting this discussion on public health and many of the issues relating to healthcare technology. This panel has been phenomenal, and I've learned so much from all of you. So thank you, Pete. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Ivana. I am sorry to everyone for my internet connection issues. I am a victim of poor technology today. And I'll now hand over back to Holly. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. I have a renewed faith in democracy, which is always good for a Wednesday morning. Yeah, really incredibly insightful, and I know we'll be pushing this out to the broader audience. So for everyone viewing, you will send a follow-up email with some of the things that people mentioned. Again, speakers, if you have links, if you have things you'd like to share, we'll pop those in. You can also view this on YouTube almost pretty much immediately after this session, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you again to all of our speakers for getting through despite the various connection issues that have haunted us this morning. And yes, enjoy the rest of the week. Thanks again.
Thank you.